I'm so excited to talk about this. I can talk about shadow work for days.
Days on end. I love those.
Days
Okay,
on
let me
days
just
on days.
days on days on
Shadow
days.
work is my fave thing ever.
Welcome to the Aligned and Divine podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Smith.
And I'm your host, Olivia Thomas. We created this podcast to have a safe space for you to share, connect, relate, and ultimately to grow.
The goal of this podcast is to share with you the strategy and mindset necessary to align with your highest self so you can massively uplevel your business, your relationships, your self-concept, and step into your innate divinity to raise the consciousness of the entire planet.
We want you to know that you are always aligned and divine.
Welcome to another episode of the Aligned and Divine podcast.
Podcast, your new favorite spirituality and self-development pod.
Okay, today we're talking about shadow work and healing your inner child and really how we use shadow work to heal your inner child. And we're really excited to talk about it because it's something that we're both passionate about that is really laying the foundation for how to experience a life to its fullest. So, you want to get us started, babes?
Yes, I am beyond excited about this episode because truly, shadow work has changed my life, and being able to heal my sweet, sweet inner child who for many, many, many years was very neglected and stuck in survival mode and worried about my future and the work that I've done specifically with shadow work and a couple other things we'll touch on to heal your inner child is the most powerful, important work that I think, like in my opinion, because the more that we heal our inner child and our work on unwrapping and unraveling our shadow, it helps us create our dream lives also because it makes us feel more worthy and more excited about life and just brings so many amazing things into our reality. So yes, that was kind of a tangent, but like I mentioned, we're going to kind of give some context to shadow work if you've never heard of this. So we looked up some actual definitions so we can give you some key information, but the definition of shadow work is working with your unconscious mind to uncover the parts of yourself that you repress and hide from yourself and others. This can include trauma or parts of your personality that you subconsciously consider undesirable.
Mm.
That is a
Mm.
extremely accurate definition for me that really, really resonates with me because shadow work has been when I just describe it to a friend casually, I say that it's ways to it's usually journal prompts. We'll talk about how to do shadow work, but it's usually journal prompts that make you think about things that you have not really ever brought to the surface. It's your shadow, your hidden parts of yourself that you try to hide. And it's maybe things that you have subconsciously thought about back deep in your mind, but you've never brought to the surface. You've never said out loud, you've never written down. So doing shadow work, journal prompts kind of forces you to bring it to the surface and then how I describe it is you bring it to the surface and then you release it. So it no longer holds power over you.
Mm. I'm so glad that we decided to like look up definitions too, because I think that like I couldn't have said it better myself, that definition of shadow work. And so today's episode, we're talking about shadow work and how we can use shadow work to heal our inner child. So I want to give you a little bit of a definition of healing your inner child. First of all, your inner child is like literally what it sounds like, that young version of you that dealt with a lot of trauma or dealt with whatever you had to deal with. It's still inside of you and you still have that version that's connected to you. And a lot of times you still make decisions based on that age, whatever age you were at when you when you dealt with that type of trauma. And healing your inner child, the definition we have here is inner child healing believes that the answers lie deep within. The consequences of a wounded inner child and pain must be heard. With help, the client can get to know their emotional hurt, heal, and embrace an authentic life. So that's the definition of healing an inner child. One thing that I really liked when I was reading this article was from the documentary "I Am Not Your Guru" by Tony Robbins. He says, "Heal the boy, and the man will appear." And that's literally what this whole episode is going to be about. Because when you get to heal that inner version of yourself, that inner child, like you get to show up more authentically as yourself. You get to show up in your fullness, and there's literally nothing holding you back. And it's so true when people say, like, the only thing that really is holding you back is yourself, because everything else is just a perception in your mind to be bigger than it is, but it's actually not. It's always going to be you. And when I think of shadow work and inner child healing, have you ever watched Friends?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you like you've seen like most of the episodes?
Yeah.
Like you're
Uh-huh.
familiar? Okay.
Uh-huh.
You know how Monica's like such a neat freak?
Uh-huh.
Such a neat freak. You know when she's got that closet when Chandler moved in with her and finally discovered that she had this closet? Are you
Yeah, I think
familiar?
so.
Okay.
Yes.
So for those who are listening, they're Friends, great show, hilarious. Kind of a play on Living Signal. Not kind of, is definitely a direct ripoff. Anyways, Monica is this like super like she's a super neat freak. She's really, really focused. Like it's a huge joke in many of the seasons is the fact that she is super clean. She's a neat freak. She's kind of like controlling in that sense. And when her husband finally moves in with her, or her boyfriend at the time finally moves in with her, he discovers out of everything, like you couldn't have one thing out of place in her house without her knowing. And they had a huge fight about it. And then he discovers that she's got this closet right off the living room that nobody ever noticed. Like people are at her house all the time, nobody ever noticed. And he opens this closet and it's filled to the brim with like all kinds of junk, all kinds of shit. It's just this closet where when things don't fit in her life exactly how it's supposed to, she just throws it in the closet. She throws it in the closet, she forgets about it, and that's that. That's your inner child. That's your shadow work that needs to be done. It's all of the things that you sweep under the rug, the things that you try to forget about, but you don't, and you're subconsciously holding on to them. And sometimes your closet can be as big as a coat closet. And some of us have warehouses. And, they're warehouses, and they might even be warehouses that are really organized, but they're warehouses of trauma that we just push and push away. And so I'm excited to kind of get into how we, piece by piece, take those things out of that closet, learn to accept them, and then able to let them go. So that way we can move on with our lives in a much more fuller way without shame, without anxiety. Well, not always without anxiety, but with the least amount of anxiety. We can move forward and be joyful and happy and be present in as many moments as we can.
Yeah, that
So
is a
that's
really good analogy. No, I was just gonna say that's a really good analogy. It's literally it's the parts of ourselves that we hope that no one's ever gonna find out about. And it's like
oh
we
my
think
goodness.
we think that it's okay to just have that closet and it'll be there. It's fine. I'm never gonna have to deal with it. I can live my life, in which you can like you can live your life with your inner child being hurt and with your shadow, but it's just not gonna you're not gonna be able to live your life fully. And I am in a moment we're gonna kind of talk about a little bit more about why to do shadow work and how. But you just mentioned living authentically, and
Hmm.
that's such a big part of shadow work for especially for me. Um yeah, so excited to dive into that also.
Yes. Okay, cool. So when we're talking about why, man, why don't you start us off with like what shadow work's done for you?
Yes. So, I think for me, shadow work, the main thing that shadow work has done for me is be able to release shame.
Mm,
And I love talking about shame now on the other side of it because I For some reason, my sweet inner child felt a lot of shame around some things in my life from my childhood. I had kind of a chaotic childhood, and if you know me, and we haven't really hung out in person a lot in the last couple of years, and you probably don't really know a lot of my background because I was never really open about it. But I have some, like I kind of tried to hide it, right? I tried to pretend like everything was fine and pretended like I had a normal family and had a normal home life. Like I just really put off this perception of like everything's fine. No one needs to know anything about me. I kept my like family life very surface level and whatnot because I had a lot of shame around it because I grew up in a very untraditional family, family dynamics. And my dad had left when I was 10 or so. And yeah, I can dive like fully into my story some other time. But for some reason, I had so much shame around it. I think something in my childhood or something with my inner child felt like because my life wasn't perfect, that means that I'm unlovable. And that's a really horrible feeling to have, but I felt that until I was like 25, 24, 25. I
Mm,
felt it for a really, really long time. It's been very recently that I have done a lot of shadow work to heal it. So I love talking about releasing shame with shadow work. That's kind of what it did for me. Doing these shadow work prompts made me realize that a lot of the things that I held shame around was not, I didn't need to do that, right? It kind of
mm,
made me really unpack and bring to the surface my fears, my trauma, my perfectionism, made it bring it to the surface. So then I could see it. Like I had to physically write it down. When I'm doing shadow work, I typically cry. Like I usually cry because it's bringing shit up to the surface. But then I always describe it as like, I usually do it in the evening. I'm doing my shadow work, getting so emotional. It's bringing it to the surface. And then I go to sleep. And then the next day, it just feels like a weight is lifted off my shoulder because it's like, oh, I don't need to hold that anymore. All the things that I brought to the surface and released don't need to hold power over me anymore. So that's what has really that's been my experience with shadow work. A lot of things like there used to be a lot of stuff that I literally never told anyone. I've had friends for 10, 12 years that I never told. And now I honestly I would tell anyone my life story because it doesn't hold power over me anymore. And it's like the most amazing feeling because I remember thinking, oh, I'm literally never gonna tell anyone this
mm.
stuff, right? Like I'm never gonna tell anyone. I'm gonna take this to my grave. It's fine. Like it's fine. It'll be okay. But now it's like, oh, okay, so I'm able to talk about my life and just be more authentic and be more vulnerable. And it is the best feeling in the world. So highly recommend. That's my why of doing shadow work.
First of all, I just wanna say it really quick. I remember being at that place you were at in Dallas, and,
Mhm.
like, when we were, like one of the first times that we got to sit down and have a really good, like, deep conversation, and you were, like, pouring out your heart, telling me your story, I was just like I just remember thinking, like, you seem so, I don't wanna use the word, like, strong in the sense of, like, I would say, like, empowered, like, you seem like you were on the other side of it, and,
Mhm.
like, it was you were just taking control of your story, and it wasn't something like, I immediately was like, "Oh my goodness," like, if you were any less, like, owning it, it would seem like you were so ashamed, and I
Right.
think that that's the thing is, like, once you kind of get past that mental block, everybody around you like, nobody has any choice but to accept it because you've accepted it.
Exactly. Oh my
Yeah.
God. I just got chills when you said that because that is so true, and that kinda ties back to so many different things of everyone is kind of reflecting our own beliefs. But I yeah, that's literally such a good point because it was when I was not accepting myself and accepting my story, that's when I thought that other people wouldn't accept it. So then it's like, "Oh, I'm accepting my story. I'm taking the power back.
Mhm.
I'm realizing I have nothing to be ashamed of." So then I knew that other people would be reflecting that. So it was like easy to talk
Oh my
about and
goodness,
discuss.
yeah. And, like, it made me go like, "Oh, yeah, okay, this is normal." It's not, but I'm like,
So you're like,
"But
"She's good."
okay, you rocking with me." Oh my goodness, yeah, so that's another huge thing. So you brought up shame. Shadow work has done that a lot for me, and we're gonna get into how, like, to do shadow work and, like, the practicality of it all, but, like, the huge why behind it for me, because the reality of shadow work is this: there's a reason why you put that shit in the closet, okay? There's a reason why you flipped it under a rug. There's a reason why you don't wanna deal with it. It's because it's painful and it hurts, and when you bring something that was once in the dark to the surface, it is painful,
Right.
and it hurts, and you're crying, and, like, you feel like you don't have control over a situation because you're just feeling the emotions. And one thing that I really, really learned, I learned this with my mom and, like, the way that she dealt with her mom's death and how it led to her death. And it was just like, I realized that you're gonna feel the pain regardless.
Mhm.
If you wanna put it off 10 years, 20 years, whatever, or you wanna bring it into the next generation, that's totally up to you, but you will feel the pain regardless.
Yeah.
You will feel the grief. You will feel whatever it is that you are feeling. The question is, are you gonna feel it now, get it over with, let that feeling go through you and move on? Or are you gonna continue to put it off, put it off, put it off, put it off, and let it build up?
Right. Where it's
Because in
like
the process of you
subtle.
putting things off, other people, you're hurting other people. Like, I remember in my grief and in my pain, I'm thinking like I'm just dealing with this by myself. Like, I was actively working through it at the same time, but I'm like, I'm dealing with this by myself. Nobody else is going to have to deal with this. Nobody else is going to, I'm not hurting anybody but myself. Not true. I was hurting everybody around me. I just didn't realize it because I was so focused on my own pain. And so, like, for me, shadow work, the biggest benefit out of shadow work and the reason why I'm okay with going through the trenches, I'm okay with going into the abyss, I'm okay with bringing the shit up that stinks and sucks and hurts is because on the other side, life is so much more free. Like,
Oh
I
my
feel
god.
free, I feel happy, I feel joyful, I feel peace. All of the fruits of the spirit are what I feel, and I feel so connected. My relationships are deeper. I'm able to love more. I'm able to show up authentically without shame. I'm able to literally just be who I am and genuinely, not just say it, but genuinely not give a shit what other people think about me.
Yeah.
And it makes every single interaction that I have, every connection with different people, and, like, my relationships with my friends so much more meaningful, so much deeper. And I'm able to be there for people that I love. And I'm able to show up in such a different way. And so I go through the trenches and I go through the shit. But that's the biggest benefit of coming out and shadow work. And then the biggest benefit to doing shadow work and healing, specifically to heal my inner child, is that I'm able to experience joy in such a more profound way than I would had I not. And I know this because I've done both.
Yeah.
I've done both.
Right. Exactly. We've
Right.
lived both, like, I've lived before shadow work and I've lived after, and I promise literally everything you just said, Mercedes, like, you're able to show up in the world as your authentic self,
Yeah.
proudly and happy and not worrying about what other people are gonna think about you, and because you accept you,
Mhm.
and just it's 10 times better. It's not like you're not always gripping on to this, like, fear. It's like it's not holding power over you anymore. It's not
Mhm.
this there's not these clouds that are over you at all times.
Oh
S
my goodness.
Yeah.
So we're really getting into, like, first of all, it's hard. Here's what it is. Here's the benefits. Let's get into how, because
Yes.
I think even while we're talking, I'm realizing other ways that I was doing shadow work that weren't always intentional, but were definitely beneficial. And then other ways that I intentionally went into the trenches and like was super intentional about it that were also beneficial. So I think it's important, like when you hear these terms like shadow work and inner child, that they can feel like really vague concepts that are just kind of like in the ether and they're not tangible, but I promise you that they are. Like,
Yeah.
they are as tangible as words, or the same way that currency only has value because we give it value is the same way that these, the shadow work and the inner child, like, they have value because we give them value. The whether that value is negative or positive is also up to you. And so that's where the shadow work comes in. And I know that, Olivia has some really cool, like, shadow work methods that have been helpful to me and that I'm sure is like the first step to getting into it. I'd love to hear, Bib.
Yes. I For me, I have done shadow work by journaling. So I'm not exactly sure who invented these specific journal prompts, but there are specific journal prompts that really target your shadow, right? That really ask questions in a certain way to make you dig deep and make you realize, you know, the why behind a lot of these journal prompts. So I've gathered my favorite journal prompts that I've done and put them on a sheet, and I will have that in the show notes so everyone can download that. Or if you know me, just text me and I can send them to you. I'm sure I've sent them to a lot of people, but if you need me to
Yeah.
send them again, please reach out. It's my favorite thing to do, to send these to people. But so the way that I typically do shadow work is journal prompts. And I like to make a solid amount of time, maybe 30 minutes or so, to really be alone, set my intentions to get deep, pick one prompt. You don't have to do a ton of prompts at a time. I only do one. Pick one prompt, and I just really, really let myself be honest. I think that's a really
Mm,
big key, is letting yourself really be honest, no matter how stupid you think it sounds or how hard it is. I always recommend writing things down, like writing it down, like no one's ever going to see it. Like, you don't have to ever show anyone this. It's really getting deep and being like, okay, why am I thinking the way I'm thinking? What parts of myself are parts of myself that I've tried to hide for so long? And whatever the prompt says. So that's how I do it. I think I've gotten to a point where I don't necessarily need prompts anymore. I still do prompts sometimes, but other times, if I realize and notice a part of myself that I know needs some healing, I really let myself sit with it and figure out why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And again, it's like I usually cry because I'm like, oh shit, like I I forgot about this, and I forgot that this is actually affecting me at all times, but it's time to realize it and time to bring it to the surface.
yeah, I think journaling is like such a huge thing regardless. You guys will hear us talk about journaling every freaking episode.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, it's gonna
There's
happen.
It really is, because it's so powerful bringing your thoughts and putting them on paper, right? It's so powerful bringing it from here, from your body, and just putting it out there and putting it on paper. It's very therapeutic and good for releasing things. So yes, we are big journal fans over here.
So for me, like, I think journaling is definitely a huge part, but my shadow work, when I like just during this conversation, I'm realizing, oh, like I actually did X, Y, Z, A, B, C as well. I totally forgot about that. Once I took it out of the closet, analyzed it, did what needed to be done, and did the work of accepting it and letting it go, it was gone. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It was
Right.
gone. I never thought about it, never dealt with it again because I let it go. And then there are going to be some things that like you have to sometimes they're so big that you've got to come and you can only do little pieces of it and you got to put it back. And there's some like, you know what I'm saying? So for me, a lot of my shadow work had to do with not only journaling and like doing those intentional prompts, I had to get extra help. So prayer is a huge part of my shadow work on a daily basis. I pray as much as I journal, I pray. I pray more than I journal probably because I pray in every aspect. And when I really started connecting with Jesus was when I started praying differently. I saw this movie last year. It might have been last year, or the year before last year, but I was with Morgan and it was so funny. It's called The Shack. Have you ever heard of it?
Uh-uh.
Okay, this movie is like a super duper controversial Christian movie that like Christians themselves are super controversial about. I don't care. I'm not here for the controversy. I'm here for the story. Okay. So me and Morgan finally sat down and watched it based on one of our friends' recommendations. And we were like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. It's about this guy who basically almost dies, goes to heaven, ends up like in this whole situation where he meets God, but God is in three different versions. So God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So he meets these three different people who are God. One is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But the Father is like this woman, or not the Son, but the Son. And the one is Jesus, and then one is the Holy Spirit. And he has these different encounters with them. The one that like really, really got to me was this encounter with Jesus. So he's going from one island onto this other, trying to find his daughter. And he's in this boat with Jesus. He's literally in this rowboat. And he's like talking to Jesus. And he's just like, he's angry at God, at Jesus, at everybody, because his daughter is like something happened with his daughter's missing. I can't remember the whole situation, but he's angry. And he's like in this rowboat, he's angry. And then as he's talking to Jesus, you hear his speech go from like just kind of surface level worry to like he's spiraling in his
Mm.
speech and he's rowing and he's spiraling. And then all of a sudden the boat starts sinking, water's getting in the boat. And he's like, oh, you're supposed to be helping me, Jesus. Like you're literally God. Why are you not helping me? And then he's just looking around and all he's seeing is this murky water and these and like all he is feeling is like a panic attack and like everything is going wrong. He's stressing out. He's like, I'm literally about to start drowning. And Jesus just looks at him and he says, look at me. This is all in your head. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he's like, look at me. This is all in your head. I'm here with you. And then he's like, breathe. And then the dude's like, looks at Jesus and he's there with him, sees that he's there. And then all of a sudden, calm water. There's no water in the boat. And Jesus was like, this is how you react. This is how you are. When you are spiraling, you go into these, it's all in your head though. Because the reality is you're here in a boat with me. And so
Mm.
that's something that always really, really got to me after that. And it really helped me expand my relationship with Jesus because I was like, it's not bad when I say I'm mad at God or when I say I'm mad at the universe. Or I'm just like, I'm angry. I can express those things, but God's there for me in my anger. And I think that that's one thing that I like growing up and with religion and stuff like that, like we kind of get that disconnect where we think that we can only come to God a certain way, but especially in my shadow work is when I come to Jesus the most.
Okay.
Is when I'm like you know, because that's where God makes me feel the most loved and the Holy Spirit is there and like this so that's really really important to me is when I'm in those moments of meditation and in prayer that Jesus is there with me. He feels like my big brother. Most of my life Jesus has felt like a big brother next to me. He's always there to take care of me. Oh my god, I might cry. He's always there to take care of me, but he's always there to like help me work through those things. Another thing that I did was I did Reiki healing with Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to plug Kevin in this episode because he's an incredible Reiki master. And when our first meetings, we had done a couple of things together, but he really taught me the importance of transmutation. Transmutation is taking something and like literally transmuting it, turning it into something else. And that is literally the definition of shadow work is being able to look at your shadow self or look at these things that you feel shame about, that you feel gross about, like not just things that have happened to you that is traumatizing, but things that you have done. There have been many times where I've been a terrible person because I'm lashing out in anger or I'm doing whatever the case may be. And I did something that I feel ashamed of.
Yeah.
And so it's taking those things, taking those moments, being able to look at them, accept them
Oh,
as like, that is something that happened. It shaped my experience. It's part of me, but it doesn't need to define me. And then you're transmuting it, literally turning it into a different type of energy of like,
yeah.
I love myself and this is okay. Like, I love you. I accept you. I forgive you is the most important. And I release you. It's
Yeah.
okay. And that is something like dealing with transmutation and with Kevin doing that work with Reiki, like it really transformed my life in like completely different projection. After I was done with that, then I was able that even helped me transform my relationship with Jesus even more and also helped me in my like shadow work journey of like that made my shadow prompts deeper. It made my like it made me go deeper and then also my relationships with everyone around me. Then I was able to now work through things not only on my own, but like I could talk to you about them. Even
Mhm.
this podcast is like really healing in those aspects. But I could talk to you, I could talk to Morgan, I could talk to these people who like I trusted with my shadow because I've shown aspects of my shadow self to other people and they still accepted me and loved me and realized that I'm not perfect and that's okay. They still love me. So those are some of the ways that I've been able to practically use shadow work and be able to kind of teeter that line between like being in this really intense spirit self, right? In the ether in my brain or, working in spirit and in shadow. And then also then how do I show up for work?
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Right.
like you just talk and I think the biggest thing that's helped me with balancing that act is involving other people, like people that I trust, and like truly going through the process of letting it go and also doing it little by little. When I was like bottling things up all of the time and I would have these huge outbursts, it's just too much versus like you do, where it's like every day, basically, I'm spending 20 to 30 minutes a day, either in prayer or journaling. I'm journaling, I'm doing something that's getting that out, that's working through it every single day because it makes me a better person.
Yeah. What you just said about, yeah, transmutation, I think that is so that's been such a big part of my healing and shadow work journey also. I don't think I really touched on that, but well, okay, there's a couple things.
Mhm.
Transmutation, 100% just want to emphasize that it's the best feeling. That's why another reason why we should do shadow work and why it's so beneficial because it goes from your trauma, something that you are embarrassed or feel shame around. That's the worst fucking feeling, right? Feeling
Mm.
shame is the worst feeling. There's a emotional scale that you can look at. Shame is the bottom, right? So if we feel shame around something, I believe that that no one should feel shame unless you are like hurting children or something, feel shame, but there's so many things that we feel shame around that we do not need to feel shame around. So shadow work transmutates your shame to acceptance. One, just
Mhm.
acceptance. For me, it's changed some of my things that I was embarrassed about to things that now I literally feel proud about. I'm like, oh, I
Mm.
actually am grateful that I went through a chaotic childhood because now it's like I can be an example of
Mhm.
how you can come from, not a perfect childhood and then create an amazing life for yourself. Like I'm literally
Yeah.
grateful that I have a weird, unique background, right? So like
Yes.
how much of a better feeling is that than being embarrassed and shameful about it? Now it's like I own it and it
Yeah.
is to my benefit.
And
It's
nobody can tell me otherwise.
exactly. No one can tell me otherwise. And then the second thing I wanted to touch on was this kind of idea that sometimes we'll have something traumatic happen to us that is something horrible that happened to us in the past, right? And we feel at this point we've gone so many years holding on to it, holding on to
Mhm.
that anger, holding on to that shame, embarrassment, whatever it is, and it feels like it's part of us, right? I There's some people in my life that I am trying to talk to about how we don't have to hold on. There's some things that we are pissed about and we just hold on to it because we think that you think you have to continue being angry and continue having that as part of your identity, and it feels almost scary. Like our brain loves to be comfortable, and sometimes being comfortable is doing what we've always done. So if you have always held on to this pain that feels comfortable. So doing shadow work and releasing and realizing you don't have to hold on to it anymore can be scary and can be hard, but it's so, so worth it. And it only helps yourself, right? And that's, I mean, I think I've said this already, but and I'll say this all the time. I hate cliches, but it's like they always end up being true of like forgiveness only helps yourself, or holding on to resentment is not only that holding on to resentment and pain is only hurting yourself. So forgiving situations in your past, I promise it feels scary and it feels like, oh, this situation doesn't deserve my forgiveness, but
And they probably don't.
they
And
probably
they
don't.
don't.
Right. They probably don't.
But that's not for you to
But
judge.
it's not, yeah. But you healing and forgiving, it helps you.
It's so interesting because there's these levels to forgiveness and there's these levels to shadow work. There's mother wounds that I have and the abandonment issues that I have. These are things that I've been unpacking for like 6 years now.
Right.
Like when I
Oh,
became really aware of it, it's been like 6 years ago. And like, I swear it's something that I'm constantly unpacking. And like, particularly the mother wounds, like when my mom died, like that was heavy, and having to deal with the grief and like all of that stuff. And now it's a different level. Like, there's levels to this shit. And there's some things that I was able to take off the shelf, accept, let go, love myself on, and forgive for, and it be done with it. And I don't even think a second thought of it. And there are things like this that I'm like, okay, it's literally been years. And I feel like I'm supposed to be over this already, and I'm not. And I think that it's okay. And that's when it's okay to bring other people in and other people that you can trust to help you with these things. But
mhm.
I just love this whole episode too, talking about shadow work and healing your inner child. And the last thing that I kind of want to leave us off on is like the shadow work is heavy and all that stuff, but then on the other side of it is joy. And like when you're specifically dealing with your inner child, there are some ways, some little practical ways that I like to do inner child healing, that don't always hurt. That's
Yeah.
very true. For me, I like to play with my nieces and my nephews. Like I like to genuinely play with them. Like when they want to hang out, I'm not on my phone. I'm like literally very present. I'm picking up the phone for the receptionist. I'm in the doctor's office with them, like
Mhm.
like in our living room, but I'm at the doctor's office and they're the
Mhm.
doctor, you know? Or like little things like that that really bring me joy to help like them. And then other things I like to do is just like I like to paint like things that make me stop and get off my phone, or make me stop and get off doing whatever I'm like. Even reading is a huge way that I do a lot of inner child healing. Some of these books are not good for children. Most of them aren't, but I like to healing in general is something that I do that like also helps with those things. So
Doing
there,
things that you enjoy, like doing things
yeah,
that you like, allowing yourself to do things that you actually like doing. Like you
yeah,
like reading. It's like, okay, I'm gonna let myself enjoy this. I am, again, I'm so excited about this episode and so excited for people to listen to this. And I really, really, really hope that it helped and inspired you to try doing shadow work, because like you just mentioned, Mercedes, on the other side of shadow work is joy.
mm,
It's true joy. It's true, just making your life better and better and better. I promise. And if it ever does feel hard, genuinely, I love talking about it. So reach out to me. Our contact info is on in the show notes
and in the
and
description if you're watching on YouTube.
the description. And if you are interested, the shadow work prompts will also be in the show notes. And we're
Yeah,
so, so excited to hear how it goes.
yeah. So, thank you for listening to this week's episode. We hope that you enjoyed it and that you really, really got something from it. And if you did, leave us a review, babe. What are you
do a
doing,
little
babes?
do a little review, do a share. I don't know if you know anything about podcast analytics, but reviews really, really help with growth. So if you can leave us a review, that would be amazing.
Yes, we would love to hear from you how you thought of this podcast. Also, if you're listening to this on Spotify, there's like a little poll down there. I don't know if you've ever seen them. We discovered them
New. It's
recently. They're
new.
new,
Yeah.
But every episode has a little poll that you can take. And if you're listening to this when the episode first comes out or within the like a week or two after, we would love to hear from you because those polls are specific to that episode. And they're definitely going to help us be able to make more content that you want to hear and talk about things that you want to listen to.
We love ya.
We love ya. We do.
We love ya. We love
We
ya.
love ya. We do. See you on the next one, babes.
See you on the next.
Bye.